Namaste, friends, disciples, and devotees. Today we continue with our terminology in the integral yoga, and we will cover consciousness, mostly from Sri Aurobindo with one quotation from the mother. Sri Aurobindo. Consciousness is a fundamental thing, the fundamental thing in existence. It is the energy, the motion, the movement of consciousness that creates the universe and all that is in it. Not only the macrocosm, but the microcosm is nothing but consciousness arranging itself. This was from the letters on yoga, and he gives another even more detailed explanation in the letters on yoga. Ordinarily, we mean by it, consciousness, our first obvious idea of a mental waking consciousness, such as is possessed by the human being during the major part of his bodily existence, when he is not asleep, stunned, or otherwise deprived of his physical and superficial methods of sensation. In this sense, it is plain enough that consciousness is the exception and not the rule in the order of the material universe. We ourselves do not always possess it. But this vulgar and shallow idea of the nature of consciousness, though it still colors our ordinary thought and associations, must now definitely disappear out of philosophical thinking. For we know that there is something in us which is conscious when we sleep, when we are stunned or drugged, or in a swoon, in all apparently unconscious states of our physical being. Not only so, but we may now be sure that the old thinkers were right when they declared that even in our waking state, what we then call our consciousness is only a small selection from our entire conscious being. It is a superficies. It is not even the whole of our mentality. Behind it, much vaster than it, there is a subliminal or subconscious mind, which is the greater part of ourselves and contains heights and profundities which no man has yet measured or fathomed. In the Life Divine, he shares two things. In such a view, the word consciousness changes its meaning. It is no longer synonymous with mentality, but indicates a self-aware force of existence, of which mentality is a middle term. Below mentality, it sinks into vital and material movements, which are for us subconscious. Above, it rises into the supramental, which is for us the supraconscient. But in all, it is one and the same thing, organizing itself differently. This is, once more, the Indian conception of Chit, which as energy creates the worlds. Consciousness is not only power of awareness of self and things, it is or has also a dynamic and creative energy. It can determine its own reactions or abstain from reactions. It can not only answer to forces, but create or put out from itself forces. Consciousness is Chit, but also Chit Shakti. That is from the letters on yoga. In the Life Divine, he says also, for the essence of consciousness is the power to be aware of itself and its objects. Now, we continue with the letters on Savitri, a rather long and very thorough statement from Sri Aurobindo. To me, for instance, consciousness is the very stuff of existence, and I can feel it everywhere, enveloping and penetrating the stone as much as man or the animal. A movement, a flow of consciousness is not to me an image, but a fact. If I wrote, his anger climbed against me in a stream, it would be to the general reader a mere image, not something that was felt by me in a sensible experience. Yet I would only be describing in exact terms what actually happened once. A stream of anger, a sensible and violent current of it, rising up from downstairs and rushing upon me as I sat in the veranda of the guest house, the truth of it being confirmed afterwards by the confession of the person who had the movement. This is only one instance, but all that is spiritual or psychological in Savitri is of that character. What is to be done under these circumstances? The mystical poet can only describe what he has felt, seen in himself or others, or in the world, just as he has felt or seen it or experienced through exact vision, close contact, or identity, and leave it to the general reader to understand or not understand or misunderstand according to his capacity. A new kind of poetry demands a new mentality in the recipient as well as in the writer. And our last quote from Sri Aurobindo from Letters on Yoga. Consciousness is usually identified with mind, but mental consciousness is only the human range, which no more exhausts all the possible ranges of consciousness than human sight exhausts all the gradations of color, or human hearing all the gradations of sound. For there is much above or below that is to man invisible and inaudible. So there are ranges of consciousness above and below the human range, with which the normal human has no contact, and they seem unconscious, supramental or overmental and submental ranges. The last quote is from the Mother, Words of the Mother, volume 15. Consciousness is the faculty of becoming aware of anything through identification. The divine consciousness is not only aware, but knows and effects. Namaste all. See you next week.